Hey there. Welcome to Top of Mind. Real talk for today's woman. With Anna and Karen.
All right, so you got it.
Yes.
So this morning, this affirmation kind of popped up, and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about it.
Cool.
And I don't know if you could see this. I
I
alone hold the. Can you read that?
Yep. I alone hold the truth of who I am. Mm.
Tell me what comes to mind.
I am the one. It's I I'm self-defined by me, not by anybody else. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Um so I'm defined by my thoughts, by what I think about myself, not necessarily by my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Let me ask you this: how hard is that? Now, I would say that you're self-aware. I would say to some degree I have that self-awareness, but how hard is that for us women?
extremely hard. I mean, first of all, it entails having a good relationship with yourself. And how many women have a good relationship with themselves? How many know that they have a good relationship? Because there's a lot of women disconnected from all that chatter that happens up there. 80,000 thoughts in a day, 60 to 80,000.
Mm-hmm.
Very negative, many of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's the way we're designed, right? It's the way our brain is designed in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Um, we've been around for thousands of years, and thousands of years, our design really hasn't changed. Um, and it's our archaic brain. So, what do you do?
It, sorry, in
How do you
regards
stop
to
that?
how do you
How
stop
do
that? Well, you have to become
Mhm.
aware of it. That's the first thing. Not everybody's aware of it. So you need to stop and get quiet and listen. You know, um, for many years, I was so uncomfortable sitting still. I used to say that ADHD and avoiding and ignoring and that type of stuff. No, it's because what I didn't realize when I sat still, there was a voice inside of me that was trying to kill me. That told me I was shit, crap, all this type of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And when I sat still, I'd get uncomfortable and I didn't know why until I stopped and kind of asked myself, what am I saying to myself? So you have to listen,
Mhm.
you know? Talking to yourself, I think, is a great thing. Outside, there's nobody else around. Okay, I mean, talking outside. Don't do with the others. Nowadays, you can get away with it, but you still look a little crazy. But the reason why is you hear what you're telling yourself. You know, there's quite often a day I'll go on. It's like, oh, Karen, you're being silly. Ashley, that's not the word I use. You're being stupid. And it's kind of like that's a very harsh thing. So it's when I say it aloud, oh, Karen, you're being stupid. It's like, oh, wow, that was it. No, I'm just being silly. It's okay. You know, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean anything about my intelligence and kind of negate it. It's so important to negate this stuff because if you don't, it goes from your conscious to your subconscious. Your subconscious just takes everything in. It's not right or wrong, it just is. So if I say
Mhm.
the sky is orange, it believes it, unless I counteract it, say, well, no, it's blue. So it's important for us to have an
Mhm.
internal debate going on. And then it becomes easier. You become much more positive in your feeling and affirmations about yourself. What about you? What do you do?
Well, I think I'm like you. Like growing up, I mean, it honestly, I'll be honest, it took me a long time to figure out this shit. This is like the last piece of my puzzle. It probably didn't really start happening for me and until within the last 5 years. And I think in a lot of ways there's like freedom in midlife because you can
Mhm.
put down a lot of that bullshit. I say them, although I've lost weight, the most weight I lost is the weight of other people's opinions because I don't give a
Oh, I
I
love that.
yeah. So
Love
that's
that.
that's the that but I wasn't confident enough with who I am in my life, Karen. I was a victim.
Mm.
Life happened to me, not for me. I did not understand my own role in the creation of life, but now I do. But it's a hard concept. It is a freaking hard concept to step out of being a victim and into being the creator. And our thoughts are a big part of that. So for me, what I try to do, or one, is to recognize that I am the creator. So yeah, our brain goes on automatic, and like you said, there's automatic thoughts. But what happens is these thoughts come and they go. Where we get into trouble is when emotion comes along and we tie our emotion to that thought. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, we have random thoughts all day. But once we stick an emotion, like you said, I'm stupid. Once you stick that emotion to it, that's the thoughts that stick. So what it's really funny because when I started on this journey over 5 years ago, I could not float. Okay. Now years, I'm not a strong swimmer at all,
Oh,
but I could not.
I didn't know where
So
we're going, floating.
oh, sorry. So I went to the beach and I'm in the ocean and I realized, because I read this thing about what I needed to do to float. And guess what? I learned to float.
Let
So
go.
here I am in my 50s. For the first time in my life, I learned to float.
What did
And
you have
that's
to
kind of
do?
how I had to completely let go. I couldn't be like, yeah, I'd be floating and this would be me. I'd have my feet up, I'd have my head up above the water and my arms up. I had to learn to relax and just let go. And it's a funny thing. That's so when I find myself stuck in thoughts, I think about that float. Because there's always tricks. There's tricks that we'll talk about as how, what helped you, what helped me. But it's just freaking learning to float. And it opened up all kinds of doors for me as it
Hmm.
relates to, yeah, just recognizing, life, and recognizing, like you said, our brain, our subconscious is like a computer. It doesn't forget anything, but it doesn't really do anything either. It just records. Um, and for a long time, like even before I became more aware, I'm trying to figure out, like people say, well, you got to change your mindset. I'm like, pardon my French, how the fuck do you change your mindset? Like seriously, is there a magic pill I can take that, will change? I feel like those terms are out there, but how to actually do it isn't really talked about much. So, and I know you do a lot of work around mindset, but I just, again, like I read the book Mindset by Cynthia Dweck about having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. But it's hard. It's hard as shit to, flip the switch from one to the other.
It takes, on average, 5 to 10 years is
Wow.
what I've seen.
Really?
And yes, I mean, I've been working with mindset my whole life, right? From when I was 21 and went for a job, um, and used Tony Robbins' uh, neurolinguistic programming anyway to get the job, which I had no credentials for. But so
Right.
it's kind of, I looked at mindset. I've worked with women, and it's changing that mindset. It's not easy, and it takes consistency. But it's like everything. It's, I want to lose 5 pounds in 3 days. So, oh, for this week, I focus on my mindset, making it better, this type of stuff. And oh, 5 days later, it hasn't changed. No, because you know what? Your mindset is made from the habits that you do every day, and thinking is a habit. What you think about is a habit, you know? And you
Hmm.
have, they tell us in AA, how long did you have the drinking problem? Do you think you're going to get sober and it's going to be fine 2 days later? So there's right there an expectation. It's going to take you as long to become as it was to become messed up. Okay. And it's the same thing with mindset.
Hmm.
But you're right. Nobody tells us how to do it because there's no single formula.
That's
You know, if
interesting.
If there was, everybody would doing it, but instead, it's a bunch of small little incremental things. Kaizen, I love that word. I was introduced to this concept back in the 80s, which is the Japanese Toyota firm went out there and basically they were like number 20 in the world. They wanted to raise up in car sales. And they went to each person on their production line and asked them if there's now each, you think of a car production line, each one has a small little part they do. And it's kind of like, okay, what would you do to improve this part? And then over the next 5, 10 years, they started to make those improvements, every one that they suggested. And they went from like down in number 20 to number 6. I tell that story often because I experienced it and used it when I was a on a production line as a manager with a bunch of employees when I was working at the post office, and it worked.
Hmm.
Small incremental daily changes lead to huge shifts. You look back 2 years later and go, oh my God, I barely recognize who I was. I don't know about you, Anna. I am not the same person I was 5 years ago. I don't even look the same. Like I wouldn't recognize 10 years ago. Like even who I hang around with, what I
Right.
believe in, what I think about, you
Right.
know?
But that's the key. And therein lies the problem, is because I call it, and you're absolutely right, but I call it micro steps. Same thing,
Yeah.
same theory,
Yeah.
but different. And it's a micro step, but we are instant gratification. Like when I'm working with a woman and she's like, well, I want to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. I said, you can't unless you put down the weight of other people's opinions. I said, did it take you 2 weeks to put on 10 pounds? But and that's the problem. That is where we get stuck, is taking those very micro, tiny actions every day because we don't see the results. But when we look back like for instance, when I started losing weight, I didn't see the results right away. It took
Mhm.
me 8 weeks to lose a pound. But then I looked back and I could see the changes that I went through, and then the weight start. So, but I think that is the problem. Like we would rather swallow a pill
Yep.
that makes us happy or makes us fulfilled, or gives
Lose
us
weight.
lose weight, um, versus taking those micro steps, which are show me your habits and I'll show you your life kind of thing. um, Show me what you do on a daily basis and I'll like that kind of principle. And that's the hardest part. and it,
There's
and
also,
I'm sorry, people always talk about consistency, and I'm like, perfection doesn't exist. And again, as women, we believe, everything has to be perfect. We do. Um, and consistency doesn't look like every day. Consistency may look like 5 out of 7 days that we're doing things. So we got to lose the I have to be perfect. I have to do things this way every day. No, you have to do things this way most of the time.
and
So,
it also means taking responsibility. See, there's a difference between me reaching for a pill and it solving the problem and me looking at my life. Like one of the in phrases last year that I kept hearing was radical responsibility. Everybody was
mm,
saying radical
yeah,
responsibility,
it's true.
you know, and the buzzword. And
Yep.
I love the concept and the idea until I had to apply it to me. And it was
Hmm.
easy when it was like, oh yeah, my business and things like that. But I forget what it was. I wish I could remember right now, but there was something that came along and I had to own it. It was my fault. And it's like, I didn't want to own that. I
Hmm.
don't want to own that I'm overweight because I don't do things. I'd rather take a pill. So it's also about taking that responsibility, which is a huge piece.
And I agree. And again, and I don't mean to kind of, you know, think or say that it's beneath people. People don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Again, that's like being the creator versus the victim kind of thing. And I know that's a very harsh term, taking radical responsibility. A lot of us get lost in the noise because there's so much coming at us as to just how simple that is, Karen. Just how simple that is. Because we as humans, part of our brain, we want to make everything complex. If it's not hard, then it doesn't work. It's just
Yeah.
the opposite, right?
Yeah.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's about, breaking it down. And that's kind of, I think, what you do and I help people with, is we break it down to make it, those tiny little bites. I used to tell my kids when they were younger, when they were be overwhelmed, well, how do you eat an elephant? And at first, you can't eat an elephant. You can't eat an elephant. Sure, you can, but it's one bite at a time.
There's
And
many
that's,
lessons out there though. Journey of 1,000 steps stops with the first one, all that type of stuff. It's that micro type of thing. There's only two things that will change somebody from their course of action to change those habits. And it's either an emotional upheaval, like something glaring. So we think about like myself when I sobered up and went to AA. Somebody dies, your partner dies. Like, there's something emotionally that some people call that like a spiritual awakening, or it's circumstances. The other is
mhm,
repetition. You know, repetition, repetition,
Mhm.
repetition, repetition, repetition of thoughts, repetitions of habit, repetition. The problem is we get bored. And after a day, we want it gone. We want it changed, you know? I can sit here and say, I remember when I first went to AA and I sat there and we're thinking, this is like a cult, man. They say the same thing over and over and over again. And you know, from when I went in, very skeptical, you know, for well, after at first I was like, oh, please help me. And then it was 3 weeks later, I felt a little bit better. It's like, oh, you're a cult. Anyway, I kept going, kept going. And eventually it's like somewhere in there it went click and it all made sense. And it's like it started to be normal to sit there and say, hi, so and to do a serenity prayer, to believe in a God and all that. And I look back and it's like, how did that happen? Well, I went to 3 meetings a day for a while. I went to a meeting every day. When you look at it, they said the same thing over and over. And nowadays, when they start to say the readings, I can say them verbatim because
Okay.
I've heard it so many times. So the
Mhm.
other change is repetition. That's our habits. That's our thoughts. That's everything.
You know,
But that
and
takes time.
yes, and not to throw you under the bus, but I swear there's one thing that kinda has stuck out to me. You know, when we did my workshop and I talked about, like, implementing one of these habits, and you're like, "Well, I don't want to. I'm not uncomfortable enough." And I swear to God, like, I cannot tell you how many times I reflect back on that. And that goes to your first point, but here's the deal, like, as it relates to taking care of life, you know, time's clicking by. I mean, it's a gift. We sometimes don't really, you know, we go on these autopilots and you know, like sometimes as it relates to our health, we take care of our health either proactively or reactively, and most of us are reactively. Um, but anyway, I was just kind of like that stuck when you said to me, "Well, I'm not uncomfortable enough." You know, it's like my pain point's not big enough.
Yep.
But but anyway, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I think my answer was that, you know, we still need to like to when we want sometimes we do things automatically. We and there might be a better thing to do for ourselves.
Mhm.
But we don't because like you said, we're not uncomfortable enough.
Yep.
So yeah.
I always change when I'm backed into a corner.
Yeah. I mean, that's most of us, unfortunately,
Yeah.
versus the yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, that feels like a good place to end this. Backed into a corner. So, again, I'm Karen, the confidence and mindset coach, and
I'm Anna Jennings, and I am a self-care midlife mentor.
I think she, I
Changed
think,
it.
yeah, I think you're that came out a lot better. She's grabbing that word, mentor. Anyway, we talk about anything and everything under the sun. We've been there, experienced it, and we want to just share with each other and to let you know that you're not alone. Give some ideas and whatnot. If you have any questions, concerns, just put them in the comments, and we will definitely make it a topic of subject of topic, whatever. Anyway, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.